Hi there, it is Joel Greenberg. This is Life in Stages, the Season 4 podcast. And just before welcoming this week's guest, I want to thank all supporters of the podcast. And supporters are people who listen, people who share the podcast with friends and others, as well as those certainly who have been generous in their financial support to keep the podcast alive and moving on as we are now in season 4. And special thanks to Tim Ziegler, zieglerwealth.com, ZIEGLER wealth.com. Tim is a financial manager and wealth manager. Many clients of Tim's are artists, performers. Many have been guests on the podcast. So anybody who is looking for a very, very cordial, easy to talk to guy about finances, Tim is an excellent resource. Please make a note of that. And we thank him for joining us in season 3 and continuing on with us now in season 4. Joining us today, another guest adding to the Life in Stages roster is Ian Clark. And welcome, Ian.
Thank you very much.
And it's really, really lovely to have a chance to. We've worked together a few times, and it's been a while. And reconnecting, this is a business where reconnecting is never. Well, you can never predict, right? Who you will be working with, and when you have the opportunity to return to have experiences with people that you've enjoyed working with, it's just it's a really. I think it's what I find probably the most challenging and the most difficult part of this business. You often want to work with the same people, and projects don't always align with the people you most want to work with, or people's schedules don't align. What's that like for you?
Yeah, I understand what you mean. It's one of those very funny things where when you're doing a play, you have really a family.
Yeah.
And you get together and you get to know each other, and you're sort of pushed into a situation where you have to know each other very quickly, and you do. Mm-hmm. You make connections with them and so on. And then frequently at the end of the show, or whatever it is, you're on your way somewhere else and you may never see them again. It's one of the sort of oddest things about the whole business.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I'm sure all of us who do this have had the experience of exactly what you're talking about. And it's not unusual as a project is coming to an end for people to, and it's done with great sincerity, pledging they will see each other. We will continue to be friends. And sometimes that happens, but mostly it doesn't, because it's just the nature of the work. I mean, you're suddenly in a new family and a new community. Yeah. So let's go back. I mean, I'm curious. Where did this work and the interest in this work establish itself for you? Was it with your family, with school? Where did it begin and when?
Well, it actually began very early. My parents were very sort of culturally and theatrically aware. Mm-hmm. And as children, we were living in England at the time. As children, we would be taken to pantomimes, usually on Boxing Day.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I can remember going to many of them at the Crucible Theatre in Sheffield, which is one of the very well-known Northern England theatres, sort of along the Everyman in Liverpool.
Yeah.
And I can remember seeing Man in the Moon and Dick Whittington and Aladdin and Babes in Toyland and all of these things. And you would frequently in those shows, you would get a famous person that would be in doing a sort of 20-minute bit. Yeah. I mean, just recently, for example, Julian Clary was doing one in London, London Palladium. And we would go there with our friends, the Wrights, and see those plays. And also, I started doing plays sort of at church halls and something like that. Mm-hmm. I can remember my friend Stephen Wright and I, in actual fact, writing a play when we were about 8 or 9. Mm-hmm. woman at the Boys and Girls Club liked it very much and said, I'm going to put this on at the church hall.
Mm-hmm.
So we did this play at the church hall, and there were about, I don't know, 150, 200 people came to see it. And my father said to me years later, when I was actually in the business professionally, he said, "Do you remember that play that you and Stephen did?"
Mm-hmm.
Hall? And I said, "Yes." He said, "You do realize nobody past the first row could hear a word that you were saying." Oh, of course, we had no idea about vocal projection.
Yeah.
And so these poor people sitting in the audience wondering what the heck was going on. But I do remember one of them that, in fact, I have a picture of me when I was about 8 or 9 from the South Yorkshire Times.
Mm-hmm.
I was there in a sort of tricorn hat, and it was a period costume that sort of gathered like knickerbockers at the knees.
Mm-hmm.
Playing the Lord of the Manor, I remember, and I had a wife who was a young girl my age, whom I thought was very nice. But having gone to boys' school all my life, I had no idea how to talk to girls at all. And so I was trying to think of something to say to her when this other lad came up and said to me, "You're wearing my grandma's bloomers." And I said, "What?" And he said, "You're wearing my grandma's bloomers. Them's are bloomers." I said, "No, they're not." He said, "Yes, they are." And Kathleen was her name. She turned around and grinned at me. I have never felt so embarrassed
Yeah.
in my life. And I thought later on that it was kind of the universe sort of saying to me, "Look, if you can get through this
Mm-hmm.
and still go on stage, then I think you'll be all right."
Yeah. And did you, from that point, were there school experiences? Were you able to develop that interest sort of in an ongoing way?
Yeah. When the school I was actually at in England was called Gresham's, which was one of the public schools, which in British irony is not public at all. But they had an outdoor theatre there that all the boys had built, and in the summer terms would do a Shakespeare play. It was sort of built like a Greek theatre. And I remember when we emigrated and I came across to Canada, and I went into a high school, that in my grade 13 year, I did Agatha Christie's, is now called And Then There Were None.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember and I really enjoyed it. And I remember going into the principal's office the next day, and he said to me, "Oh, Ian saw the play last night. Is this the beginning of a career?" And that sort of resonated. It sort of stayed with me in the sort of background. And then when I was at McGill, and I was doing my graduate work there, I remember I was in, which you would probably know because you were in Montreal. Moyse Hall was the Faculty of Arts, and I was on the second floor.
Mm-hmm.
And my Yeats professor from third year, Joe Ronsley, came around the corner and he suddenly said to me, "Oh, hello, how are you? Are you an actor?" And I went, "No."
Mm-hmm.
And he went, "Oh, okay." And then he left. And I thought to myself, why on earth did he say that? And I made one of those promises you make with the universe. I said, if he comes around the corner again in the next 10 seconds, I'll say. And he did. I mean, there was no reason why he would. So I did. I said to him, "Why are you saying that?" And he said, "Well, I've got this student who wants to put on 3 one-act Yeats plays. And, maybe if you're interested, contact her." So I did. And we did 3 Yeats plays, Death at Cuchulainn on Byres Strand and Dreaming of the Bones. And she said to me at the end of that, "You maybe should get hold of Philip Coulter, who now works with CBC Radio. He's doing a PhD right now, and he's doing Bertolt Brecht's Galileo at the Sadie Bronfman Center. And maybe you should talk to him." So I did, and asked me, and we did that. And then I started doing plays at Sandwich Theatre in McGill. And from there, the Sadie Bronfman Center, which is now called the Seagull Center, I got in. Philip asked me to do a full season for about 2 years. They had a young company there on the second stage, and I did a full season with him. And then after that, Daniel Suisse, who was a very well-known French director at the Théâtre Rideau Vert, saw me and asked me to do Charbonneau, the chef, on the main stage. And after that, I did Da, at which point, I joined Equity.
I see.
Da was done by, there was an actor in there called Jimmy Edmonds, who was a well-known Toronto Canadian actor, married to the novelist Shirley Fessler, and Alan Richardson. And they started a theatre group called Theatre Compact.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Which came to Toronto and was a compact of all the best-known actors sort of in the Toronto, in fact, Canada, and me as the young guy. And we did Da at St. Paul's, and that went very well. And then I did a couple of other shows with them, and sort of things went on from there.
Yeah, when you mentioned Philip Coulter, I'm quite sure it was Philip who directed, I think, the last play I acted in Montreal. And it was done at McGill, and it was Rossmer's Home. Honestly, I grew a beard because I felt that I was probably, all of us were pretty young, but I had no idea. Ibsen and Joel Greenberg were not, I don't think, were the ideal couple. But I remember that he was deeply committed to working on material that was not easy, and that wasn't immediately an obvious choice. Rossmer's Home is not. I mean, it's produced, but certainly it's not right at the top of the list of Ibsen's greatest works. So that it's interesting to hear that name, because it also happens. I'm sure it happens to you. Names of people you've worked with over many years. The intersections, the links are there, and it really informs the nature, often the collaborative nature of what the work is anyway.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, I've noticed that many times in my life there's been these odd circles that have sort of joined, often many years later, which would never have guessed. You know, I mean, that's just amazing. That it's happened on a number of occasions.
I know that certainly among the many plays you've done, I know that you did The Foreigner, and it's a play that I saw. I didn't see. I did see your production of it, but before I saw your production of it, I had seen the play in New York, and it was totally charming, and written by Larry Shuey, who died died young, and so has a very limited, very limited list of completed works. And I know that was an important play for you, and I know that it was done very successfully here. What was that? How was it being, and how do you recall that production?
Well, it was. I'd just come back from doing One for the Pot, which is a farce that was put on by Brian Ricks of the Whitehall, and that was one of the circles that sort of completed. And I came back and I auditioned for The Foreigner, and as soon as I read it, I thought, I really want to do this. There are certain roles that you think, yes, this is just me. And it was an absolutely wonderful production. For me, it was very, very successful. It was a great comedy piece with a great cast, and it was at the Royal Alex. So it was a tremendous thing to do. And later on, when I was in Philadelphia doing one of the shows at the Walnut Street Theatre, I worked with an actor called Bev Appleton, and who unfortunately has just died. But I talked about The Foreigner, and he said, "Oh, did you do The Foreigner?" And I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "How did you like it?" And I said, "I liked it very much." And he said, "Larry Shue was one of my best friends."
Yeah.
And I thought, really? And I did one of his other ones. He did The Nerd as well. I think I did that one as well.
Yeah.
But the funny thing, when I go back to One for the Pot, when my parents, apart from taking us to pantomimes, they took us down to the West End. In fact, when they got married in their honeymoon, they went to the West End and saw Annie Get Your Gun in Oklahoma in their first runs. They took us down to the Whitehall Theatre, and the Whitehall Farceurs under Brian Rix were the most successful farce company ever. They beat the Aldwych record. And I saw Brian Rix do One for the Pot, play the quadruplets, Hickory Wood. And then years later, I think when I was about 38, I got to play it in Edmonton with Gail Gordon from the Lucille Ball show. And then I got to play it twice more. And the second time I played it, Bernard Fox was in the cast as one of the stars. And Bernard, people may remember from Bewitched, Hogan's Heroes, and later on Titanic and various other things. He was a British actor who came over from the UK into LA and got very successful. But the thing about it was that Bernard had been in the Whitehall Farcer company. He'd started out in theatre, and he had done the #1 tour throughout the provinces of playing the Hickory Woods that I was playing. So he was able to give me, insights into, what they had done. So that was one of those strange circles that sort of completes. Who would have known that seeing Brian Rix when I was 11, later on, I'd be playing.
Sure. You mentioned that when you read The Foreigner, you thought that you sort of saw yourself in that role. You thought that it was what was it about the character or the play that you connected so immediately and so intimately with?
I think it's just that there are certain parts you read that I say you kind of get to the second level immediately, that you have a sort of feeling that go, oh, I know where this is it should be. I know where this lands. This is not, I feel I need to particularly work at to sort of going, how am I going to sort of make this work? It's one of those things where you sort of go, oh, I know. And interestingly enough, I found out that the director, after he had seen my first edition, I had to go back and do a callback. But after he'd seen the first edition, apparently had gone to the powers that be and said, I've found him. And so, I mean, and I felt exactly the same kind of thing. I just know this. I know where this lands.
Yeah.
There are sometimes, that happens, that you just feel, completely at one with it.
Sure. Can you, and sort of moving in the opposite direction, can you talk about an experience that you had with a particular play or a particular role where you had perhaps had no idea why you were cast, or how the person casting you imagined you in a role that you might never have chosen for yourself?
If I had to try and pick one out, I'm not sure I could. There's probably other people that would sort of go, I have no idea why he was cast.
Yeah.
But and there are times when you turn around and you were read for a role and you thought you did it really well, and somebody else has been cast, and you think, oh my goodness, what was the thinking there? But there are those. I suppose sometimes somebody sort of turns around and kind of thinks, I'll go away from what might be the original casting or the ideal casting and sort of see what this person brings. I think if they'd seen you do something, they might turn around and say, let's stretch you here, or something along those lines. I think for a question of if you find yourself thinking, I wouldn't necessarily have thought of myself for this, but what can I bring to it? Because of course you always bring, each character is a part of you. You make it, and therefore is different, because nobody can do what you do. So I always look at every single thing as, okay, there was a reason why I was chosen for this, and so let me work in to see what that can be.
Mm-hmm. Do you are there particular, are there roles that you have in mind that you would like to play, or roles that you have played that you would like to have another opportunity to do?
Well, I think one of the things about an actor is always you're just waiting for what the next role is. Somebody once sort of said, what's your favorite part, and you got the next one. The one I always wanted to play and didn't get a chance to, except in a sort of a mock comedy of it, was I always wanted to play Hamlet.
Mm-hmm.
I really always wanted to play Hamlet, and I always felt that I really knew where Hamlet lay.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember thinking one of the sort of painful things was thinking, well, I'm too old now. Although Ian McKellen's done it at 82, so. Yeah. But then I did play Hamlet in a sort of sketch thing about people who go up to heaven and the various people who are in heaven, and I got to play Hamlet there. And I was also terrified that my agent was going to phone me up one time and say, you've been offered to play Hamlet in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead.
Right. Yeah.
As opposed to actual. But that was one that I felt, got away from me that I really would love to have had a shot at.
Yeah.
Other ones, the interesting thing, and you must know this as well, often, unless you're, either Stratford or Shaw or Charlottetown or one of the ones that goes on all summer, it's usually like 7 weeks, pretty much, if you're lucky. And one of the things I find is you get to a point in production, and what I call going to the second level, which is you kind of think, oh, why didn't I think of this during rehearsal?
Yeah.
You get to that point where you sort of have played enough of it to realize where I could go now as the thing grows. And I've often felt sort of sorry at the end of it, because you sort of think, oh gosh, now I would like to. And of course, for directors who generally get 3-4 weeks, it must be the same sort of thing, especially when they come back and see a production again later on and said, oh, I could have done this, I could have done that.
Yeah.
So in many ways, if you get that shot again, unfortunately, there have been times when that has happened, then you can bring that to bear as well.
Yeah, no, I certainly understand that, and in rehearsal, probably with anything that I've directed, there's often a moment, a scene, something where I can't figure out how to solve something in my own mind, like whether it's staging, whether it's building to a climax, but there's usually a moment that becomes a real problem for me. And when you've got a limited amount of rehearsal time, unlike working in a repertory system like Stratford or Shaw, where the accumulated rehearsal time may be no different than what you would have in a one-off production, what you do have in those settings is a much longer think time. So when you don't have that, I've often, the play, you rehearse the play opens, it's running, you go back to see it. And it has happened, of course, that there are moments where sort of like the coin drops and you said, I don't know why I thought this was so difficult. I now have the answer. Sometimes you're able to implement that. Sometimes it's too late. But it is. I think you're trying to deal with everything in a really compressed period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Do you still audition? Are you asked to audition for things?
I'm always asked to audition for television and film. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody does that. For a long period of time, I was just, I was in the fortunate position of people sort of phoning up my agent or me and sort of saying, are you available? Are you interested in doing this?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I have found as one has gone on is whereas before I would know sort of 95% of the people that I saw mentioned in the paper or whatever it is, I found now that I know maybe 10%.
Mm-hmm.
By name. And
Yeah.
also, many of the directors with whom I worked have either retired or they've actually passed on.
Yes. Yeah.
A number of the younger ones, I don't think know me all that well.
Yeah.
And so, what happens is now I am being asked to see people who either whom I frequently don't know, and are not aware of, haven't seen me
Yeah.
particularly on stage. They may have seen me on television, but they would not necessarily see me on stage.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know them; they don't know me.
Yeah.
So I am being asked, to audition more now than I have been for the last like 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing I found interesting when I was doing a pilot for a series called Above Asking. They were bringing people in from Los Angeles for it, and I was the only one of my vintage,
Mm-hmm.
and all the rest were about in their 30s, I would say, and they all knew each other and didn't know me,
Mm-hmm.
and I hadn't a clue who any of them were. It's just one of those funny things.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, the 5 stages of the actor's life, as they say, who is Ian Clark? Get me Ian Clark. Get me an Ian Clark. Get me a younger Ian Clark. Who is Ian Clark?
Yes. Yeah.
There's that sort of thing. But it does, unless you're at Stratford and Shaw, which, fortunately I was, but quite a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see the whole sort of panoply of young to old actors. You tend to see 5 or 6 or.
Yes.
And I was very interested. I was going to Thousand Islands Playhouse last summer, and it's a place I've done 6 shows at. But I was talking to the artistic director. We're friends. But I noticed cast members from, I think it was the Jane Fonda, Dolly Parton show. Mm-hmm. They were coming up and talking to him, and they quite obviously didn't recognize me or had any idea about who I was. So,
yeah.
That.
Yeah, I mean, many guests have, since the large number of guests on this podcast are people who, are artists who have been working for anywhere from 30 to 50 years. So people with extensive experience, and the experience you're talking about it's not unusual. I mean, it's sometimes really, it can be both. Really, it can be upsetting. I mean, I know what it's like to be introduced to somebody and talking about theater, and then the person will say to me, "So do you work? Do you work in theater?" I said,
yes.
"Yeah, I did. Yes, I did." You're not expecting. The expectation isn't that people will be able to rattle off the projects that you've done, but it really pulls you up short very fast when somebody says something like, "Do you go? Are you involved? Were you ever involved in the theater?"
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the nature of the work, and maybe it's every generation. I don't know, but getting older, it's a familiar story when people are talking to each other, and you want to think that your age shouldn't. I mean, it shouldn't be a factor that precludes continuing on, because
that's not at all.
Yeah.
I think the only thing in terms of an actor that is problematic is if you start to have trouble with lines.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if then that can be a serious problem, and there is no doubt about it. Particularly in North America, less so in the UK,
right,
and in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly in North America, there's this whole concept about youth.
Oh yeah.
and about how that is this that. I wish I've never fully understand sort of being European, because a vast majority of the people who are your audience are people who are boomers now.
Yes, that's right.
And they want to see stories about themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
as well as seeing the young people too. And a lot of that is also pushed big by the television and the film medium,
Sure.
in the US particularly.
Mm-hmm.
In the UK, you see an awful lot, particularly of sort of middle-aged and 16, sort of 70-year-old women who have a difficulty in many cases when they're being cast, but not there. You see many of them being cast, and of course you're dealing with the experience and the fact that people should be sort of playing their age.
Yeah. It's I don't know if I don't know if there was a sudden shift, or if it is that just reaching an age where the experience that I've had, and I've talked about this. I mean, it's come up in several episodes in the last 4 seasons, where some actors will say, here's a role that I know I'll never get to play, because nobody even knows that I did these 70 or 80 productions. There's sometimes a feeling that because theater is ephemeral, so the theater, the production ends. Did it ever happen? And it's a really it's very unforgiving in that way, and I think the current, I don't know your response to this, but I certainly feel that the current cultural politics sort of works to make that even more. It's sort of exacerbated by the current, what I see as the current political, social circumstances that define certainly the Toronto theatre community.
Go further into that. What do you mean exactly?
Well, what I mean is that if when I stepped down from Studio 180 Theatre a few years ago, I was speaking to one of the companies that we had partnered with a number of times, and I said, "Look, I would like to direct some more. I've always felt that I really would have benefited from the opportunity of directing in a company that wasn't Studio 180 for a while, a place where I could be probably less encumbered, where I wouldn't worry or be concerned about, are people buying tickets and what." I mean, being involved in all the aspects of the production, and when the response, and I've said, if there's a play that I'm interested in, should I send that to you? Should I let you know? And the response in one case was, well, we've hired the one white director we can hire this season. I said, well, I appreciate that you're being so direct, and you're certainly not speaking in coded language. But it makes it, it makes it very difficult for anybody to feel that in a profession that is so precarious anyway, where there is never enough work, there are always far too many people who would like to be working more than they are able to work, than the work is available, to be on the receiving end of thanks but no thanks, or that's what I mean, and the issue of who should be playing which roles, who has the right to play which roles, some of that casting is obvious, and I don't think I would advocate for somebody playing a role that they. I would not suggest that a non-black actor should be playing Othello, for instance, but if the issue is that you can only play, you can only perform or direct or write what your lived experience is. It just seems antithetical to what an artist what an artist does.
Yeah, and the very fact, in many ways, that you were being so political about how you're having to say this shows, how we're thinking now and self-censoring about all kinds of things.
Yeah.
I found myself often thinking, can I, something that I would normally flip off as some kind of what I would hope witticism and so forth, not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
And I notice there's a kind of a chill. I mean, it's very, very difficult because you understand all kinds of other things about it. And then the theatre is such a liberal place.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and we all are, and we all feel those things as well. But then, does this mean that, you can only play Macbeth if you're Scottish?
Yeah, yeah.
And kill the king? I mean, reductio ad absurdum. I mean, so... it's one of those things that I think we're currently struggling with and trying to get some kind of answer to various things. And there seems to be, the moment there seems to be a certain amount of flux about the whole thing.
Sure. And there's no question that, that the changes, really, I don't, much of it prompted by the combination of COVID lockdown and the murder of George Floyd. The world changed, and it's certainly not exclusive to theater, and people being able to talk freely about how they feel they have been treated, how the world needs to reevaluate things. That's tectonic. And it takes time to absorb what those changes mean and how to absorb them. I mean, one of the issues that I find particularly difficult now is the move to ban any Israeli academic or artist from having their work done not only in Canada, but say specifically in Canada, by a number of theater companies across the country that have signed petitions. And I honestly, I've tried to have conversations to understand what the long-term purpose is, and it's difficult enough to even have a conversation because everything very quickly falls into sides. Which side are you on? As though there is a side. And the point that I don't understand it. I understand that there are serious issues about how governments work, and you can dislike and you can protest against government policy, but I don't know how placing a ban on thinking is supposed. I don't know where that's supposed to take you. When during when Ethel Fugard was writing plays about apartheid and about South Africa, he was celebrated, and his work was done internationally, and it was important to hear, another voice, or to hear a voice that wasn't just. It wasn't the government speaking, and the false. I think the false conclusion that people draw that because you might be, in his case, from South Africa, how is it surprising that somebody would see the world differently than the government of that country? But to silence it, it's just, as I said, I don't get it. I've asked, and there's not much conversation to be had.
Exactly, because, the thing is, you have to be able to have conversations. You can't solve anything unless people speak to each other about. But as you said, there is, at the moment, there certainly seems to be, you're either on one side or the other.
Yeah.
The difficulty, instead of having sort of an intellectual, rational conversation about this and trying to listen to what somebody else's idea might be about certain, because you can learn and you can develop your own way of thinking about something. But there's too much of a feeling of kind of almost like armed camps, and that not only it's almost that, or okay, if you don't agree with me, you're my enemy,
right?
And you not only have to agree with me, but you have to agree that I'm right. And this whole thing about and it's got, as we're seeing, down south, it's got so dangerous.
Yeah.
And my only hope is that we have theatre writers who are going to be addressing this in play, so that we have, that we actually start to talk about the issues and spreading them out without sort of saying either this is right or this is wrong, but putting a theatre plot out there and how do you respond to this?
Yeah.
I mean, and we can have, people who are, sympathetic and people who are not sympathetic and everything else. But if we can't, I mean, people, as are shutting off, and they're shutting themselves off from actual things that they may want to discuss simply because they're scared of what the reaction is going to be.
Yeah.
In the sort of censorship that is going around is I find really quite remarkable. Having come in the 60s, when we were the rebels who were fighting against all the various things, particularly if you remember McGill, which was an active campus back in the day, whatever it was. As one of those 60 rebels, I find it extraordinary, this sort of almost, the almost 1939 that we seem to be in.
Yeah, it's the parallels are frightening, and I don't know what it takes. Watching the news, like currently watching what's happening in Minneapolis as an example, watching people protest it's exciting to see that people can be moved. It's terrifying to see how the government is responding. And there were certainly echoes of that during the anti-Vietnam movement. The worst of it with students being killed at Kent State, and with civil rights marches, with police, with with people being clubbed for daring to speak up. And so, it's happened, it's happened repeatedly, although now it feels far, far, far more dangerous than it. I don't know if it is more dangerous. It was always dangerous, but I think now with a government that feels, looking at it, it feels that a government is so completely out of control in some ways, or is so much in control in ways that are antithetical to how we would like the world to be moving. And yes, also at a time when the word binary is being used in many, talking about the use of non-binary as a term, but the world, it is all binary. You're either on my side or you're on the wrong side. There's very little room, and I've heard very little conversation with people who can actually talk to each other. And some of it, I'm sure, is, I don't know that it's out of fear, but I think there is at the heart of it the danger that people might feel if I actually have a conversation. I might hear a point of view that I don't share, that makes me either reconsider or at least accept that there can be a different perspective. The notion that when you look at people, when you look at the at a group of people as, you know, the other, but you actually spend time and meet an individual. That can be very unsettling, to actually see a human being and not somebody who is just a representative type.
Mm-hmm. And I think, well, you know, hopefully we are meant to be the chroniclers of our times. So I'm hoping that theater can be one of the places that, you know, we can start to write plays about these kinds of, so that people can see them and maybe have a conversation.
Yeah. Yes. You know, you can. Yes. I mean, that is the hope. You're right. This is a shift. And looking at the body of your work, I mean, you've worked in film and television a lot, and how did you, or how do you learn to act for the camera, to act in a way that is not playing to an audience that's sitting in front of you, a camera which is far more critical, it reveals so much because the camera can be used to get as close as it wants to, as it needs to the performer. How do you learn that technique?
Well, the interesting thing was, when I started out, the first actual television program I did was for CBC Teleplay. It was called "I've Always Been Lucky," and I ended up co-starring with Arden Bess, who was doing King of Kensington at the time. But at that time, there was no TV or film training in Canada. Certainly not that I can remember of any kind. And where I was very, very lucky was that my first big feature film, was a film called Equus, that starred Richard Burton, and which was directed by Sidney Lumet. And I had a tiny, tiny part in it, which was called an SBE in those days, Special Business Extra. But I got to be the stand-in for Richard Burton. So I spent 6 weeks, 8 hours, 10 hours a day, 5 days a week on that set, and speaking to, watching Sidney work, and watching how Richard worked, and watching how Lady Olivier worked, and Harry Andrews, Colin Blakely, all of those people, Peter Firth, and seeing what they did and how they did it. And I actually ended up having a very long conversation with Sidney, simply because I was so tired that I found myself doing one thing that you're absolutely not allowed to do, which was sit in one of the stars' chairs. And I didn't realize it. And I'd fallen asleep until I was tapped on the shoulder, and it was Sidney saying, "Ian, do you mind if I sit there?" I went, "Oh my God, my career's over," before it started. And I was so embarrassed. I wanted him to know I was an actor, as opposed to in the UK, they have stand-in unions, but not here. And I said to him, I have an audition tomorrow for Trevor Griffiths, the comedians. And he said, "Oh, yes, what part are you auditioning for?" And I said, "Grok. And I know he's a clown, but I don't know much about him. Do you know anything about him?" And he said, "Well, actually, yes, I do." And he said, "Sit down there next to me." And they were doing a long tracking shot for Dysart to do all the soliloquies into the camera. And so we were there for a while, and he started telling me about Grok and how he was a clown and so on. And as he did that, the rest of the actors started to come out, all of them sitting in the chairs. And I was in the middle of it, and they started talking about how Hitchcock directed as opposed to how Sidney directed, from a point of view. And as Sidney said, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But Hitchcock, when he was doing one film, had realized in the edit he needed to show it from a different point of view, and he had actually subconsciously covered it. And I was listening to all this and thinking, oh my God, let me not forget a single thing about this. But the thing that really struck me was it was just like any other bunch of actors talking about stories or anything. It was the sense of familial, of being part of a family, being part of a group. The fact that, be nice to everybody on the way up, because you never know who you're going to meet on the way down, was a part of it. And one of the things I learned from that was how they worked, sort of the difference that the camera sees your thought. So you don't need, I mean, it took me quite a while to realize if the camera was further away, I didn't need to be louder because, you've got your microphone and the sound guy is doing it. But so that was a huge help to watch like the best in the world do what they were doing. But then the other thing about it was one of the difficulties in Canada is you get hired to do a part and that would be it. But if you get to be in a series, then, and when I was hired to do Road to Avonlea, and you got to be working time after time, you started to realize exactly what you could do and how you could do it, where you needed to be. One of the difficulties I found for a theatre actor is the sort of almost claustrophobic concept of hitting your marks. Which is something that can be difficult, because you're not allowed to look at them, and frequently it's just a little black dot. And you're also trying to remember your lines at the same time, and there's 75 people around you. If you mess up and you have to do it again. These are things that you learn and become comfortable after all. Yeah, so basically, it was also working in the series.
Yes.
Was something that and just getting used to it.
Yeah.
Graphically, and then what you could do with the camera. I remember watching Mickey Mahonen one of the first times that I was doing the Avonlea thing, and thinking to myself, he's not doing anything facially, but. It was exactly the same thing Richard Burton said to Elizabeth Taylor, that Elizabeth Taylor taught him how to act for the camera. And it always reminds me of how Jack Lemmon was told by one of his directors. His director kept on saying to him, less, Jack, less, less. And eventually he sort of said, if I do any less, I won't be doing anything at all. Now you've got it.
Yeah.
So it's a question of, if you can get into, doing it more than, for a week and then not again for 3 months, that really helps you.
Yeah.
And then you understand what it is that the sort of directors are asking for. Because the other thing that's surprising is you don't get the rehearsal time.
Right.
So you're frequently hired from the audition. And, I remember one time going in early on and saying, well, I could do it this way, do it that way, or do it the next way. And they sort of looked at me and said, do it the way you did it in the audition. That's why you were hired.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm curious because you've worked at both Stratford and Shaw, right? And is there something similar? You're talking about if you're in a series, the opportunity to work repeatedly and to become very familiar with a process. Does that apply as well to working in rep, where you are not doing just one play for a limited period of time, but you may be working on 2 or 3 plays over a much longer, it could be over 5, 6, 7 months?
Yeah, I think so, because again, as I was saying before, you hit what I call secondary and tertiary levels as the on, and you get to do that.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing about it is I remember when we were doing what was it, Berkeley Square at the festival, and it was the surprise hit of the season, one of them. And it went on to the NAC, and we'd played it for about 8 months. We'd done over 100 performances of it, which is highly unusual in Canada. And Neil Monroe was directing it. And we went down to the NAC and we did the first preview at the NAC, and he called us together to have a meeting at sort of midday the next day. And we were expecting just sort of, oh, hey, guys, you know what you're doing. This is terrific. You've been doing it for 8 months and all the rest of it. Just carry on doing what you're doing. And he started out by saying, okay, I know what's happened. And everybody kind of went, what? And then we got like 2 hours worth of notes, which was basically him sort of telling us to take all the improvements out.
Yeah.
Sort of thing, and get back to what it was that, he said the thing had grown, but in certain ways, not the ways he wanted it to grow. So bring it back to whatever it was that he had wanted. And everybody was really quite surprised by the whole thing. But you could see everybody thinking about it. And of course, that night everybody went back to whatever it was. But because unless you're at one of the, Stratford, Shaw, Charlottetown, or a long running thing at the Royal Alex, or one of the other theatres, it is good to sort of have a long run, I think, and see what that does, because so often, it's 2.5 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, and it's a very familiar story to hear, particularly from actors. If it is that kind, if it is a limited run, very often you feel you've just found what you want as the production is coming to a close.
Yes.
Because you do your best to be ready for when the play has to meet an audience, but you know that you will never really be at ease until you've had a chance to play many times, because the play is going to change from one audience to the next.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Part of the whole deal.
Yeah, yeah. What are your thoughts or your recollection about having worked in both at Stratford and Shaw, by which I mean working in a large company, working over a long period of time, as opposed to the work that you've done in so many other projects where you've got, as you said, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. It's always time limited.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a different experience. Simply because, of the length of the time, and that you're actually situated in the place itself. I mean, you're actually at Niagara-on-the-Lake, or you're at Stratford.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that there are there's about either 2 or 3 companies. I mean, I can remember meeting an actor, and they're saying, "Oh, hello, who are you?" And I said, "Well, we were actually at Stratford together, but we were in different tracks." So you can, in actual fact, in the company of actors, never actually meet certain people, except going to see their shows. And I thoroughly enjoyed. I thoroughly enjoyed both times. I mean, one, there is a nice relaxation for the actor in thinking, I've got a number of weeks of paychecks coming in, which is always a consideration for anybody in the business. And it lets you sort of settle down and, think about things. And, you're playing them again and again. You're getting to know people very well. It's just, it's good in very, very many ways, I find.
Yeah.
I mean, which is not to say, I haven't had, a lot of fun doing the sort of 7-week things, but as you say, they're over before you know it.
Yeah.
Thing. And when you would actually like to have, tried this or tried that. I mean, the number of times that I have come out of a wrap party or a finishing party or going home the next day and going, gosh, what I should have done?
Yeah.
And that's just one of those things.
Yeah.
Part of the business.
And I know that you've worked at the Walnut Street Theatre a lot. And have you worked elsewhere outside of the country?
Yeah, I mean, I took my own show, which was a sketch comedy show called A Collection of British Rubbish. It went down to the Bradford Centre in Boston. We were meant to go to New York, actually, but it turned out there was a money issue with the Canadian producer, which was unfortunate. And I was in Miami at Broadway by the Bay doing The Constant Wife down there as well. And then I did... It was 8 or 9 shows at the Walnut Street.
Right.
And they are a very, very fine company of people. I got to know both Rob McClure, who's had 2 Tony nominations already, Amadeus together, and Greg Wood, who has just been on Broadway in Othello with Denzel. We've worked together a number of times at the Walnut Street. And it was run by Bernard Havard, who was here in Canada for a long period of time. He was at the Citadel, and he's the producing artistic producer down there. And he and Mark Sylvester actually turned, when I was down there, it was actually the most successful subscription theatre in the world.
Oh.
Main stage
Mm-hmm.
during a run, you played to 57,000 people.
Wow.
I mean, extraordinary. And it's the longest continually producing theatre in the US.
And do you, when you've worked there or in other American companies, is there anything different? I mean, do you know that you're in a different place than when you're in Canada, or is it just it's just that the work continues regardless of where you are?
It does. I mean, it continues because, again, I mean, this is one of the things I always really liked about the business is we're all the same. We're all part of the family. Everybody has the same kind of insecurities, the same things they like, the same this, that, and the next thing. What I did find with a lot of the American actors is that they were very appreciative of both either the UK or the Canadian stage experience. They feel that we are very classically trained, that we are able to do that kind of thing. I also found I thought that I might run into a bit of, why is this guy coming down from Canada so often, sort of thing. I never did. Everybody was absolutely collegial and friendly. I mean, they really were. It was all part of the whole thing. The other thing I really appreciated was I remember seeing one of Neil Simon's plays on the Walnut Street just prior to us. So we got to see, the prior performance and everything. And it was really good to see it done by people who are actually, Neil Simon kind of people. Just from the accent, from the way they just did things and so on. And I remember thinking, oh, that's a really good lesson. I remember seeing Tom Conti do romantic comedy, I think it was, in London. And they were doing their version of American accents, which ranged from sort of Georgia to New York and back again. And doing and thinking it's just not right. And they even had changed things. A line that said as Yogi Bear said, "It isn't over till it's over." And I went, "It's not Yogi Bear, it's Yogi Berra." I mean, they obviously thought it was a misprint kind of thing. And that was the other way around. We so often hear people doing bad English accents and so on and so forth. So it was very interesting to see that seated right where it should be. And I took a great lesson from that. But other than that, the thing I always sort of found was, if anything, the thing that did get me more was their enthusiasm that they have. I mean, they don't sort of see success or ambition as being a wrong thing. But the idea that they would be very enthusiastic, if you came into a town and they happened to recognize you or something, was, "Hey, it's great you're here, man, and this is terrific," and so on and so forth. And that was a great thing that they were. They would turn around and go, "Yeah, we're doing this really well." It was, gung ho sort of stuff.
Yeah. Do you get that same thing in Canada?
You do. Yeah, you do. I have to be careful now.
No, you don't. You can be. No, don't be careful. Just say what you want to say.
Well, there's sometimes a little bit of this sort of feeling about, downplay everything. Don't wear a set jacket or something like that. I just sort of really never quite understood that. I mean, I'm not quite sure why we don't celebrate our cultural things more than we do. There seems to be much more of a concept of downplay everything, and it's partially due simply to, I think, being up north of down south. And not wanting to sort of be, loud, slap yourself on the back kind of thing, which is not what they do anyway. But
Yeah. No,
But I think we could be more. We could be. We could celebrate our people, and the one province in Canada that really does that is Quebec.
yes.
Quebec really knows who their performers and cultural people and the artists are, and they celebrate them and so on. And I remember being down there when I was down there one time watching a French television station, and the audience knew who the guests were coming on and all the rest of it, and I didn't.
Yes.
I mean, in the business,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. They were, but they were obviously sort of, people were delighted to see them. It was a celebratory thing, whereas it often seems to me that we kind of want to sort of downplay it all the time, and you certainly don't maybe think who do you there's a little bit too much who do you think you are kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think in Quebec it's certainly about the Québécois actors, the arts in French Quebec. I didn't have the same experience with the Anglo community when I worked there. It was it's a much smaller community, but you're right. I mean, the Quebecois culture was really was extremely well exploited by the Quebecois government as a voice and as a presence that we don't have. We don't do it the same way.
And it was celebrated.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, Ian, thank you very much for being available, for making the time, and for arranging to be here to add your voice to Life in Stages. It's been a while since I've seen you or we've seen each other, but I do think very fondly of the several projects we've done together that have had various measures of success. Everything from Stuff Happens to NSFW. And of course, Cock in between.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much for this.
More than welcome. It's been great to speak with you again.
Good. And to everybody listening, this is a conversation that you certainly are going to want to share with your friends and continue to let people know about Life in Stages, and that we've got 4 seasons of artists to listen to, and that Ian is the newest member of Life in Stages. To those of you who have been able to support the podcast in the past by listening, and even more by contributing to the ongoing nature of the company and the financial needs, I thank you. And to anybody who would like to add their contribution to the future of Life in Stages, you can do it in 2 ways. If you're in Canada, an e-transfer to Jerica Life in Stages, JERICA Life in Stages at Rogers.com. For those of you outside of the country, you would go to patreon.com, patreon.com/Life in Stages. Instructions about how to contribute are very clearly laid out. Thank you all. Thanks again, Ian, and I look forward to having many of you join us for our future guests. Bye-bye.